Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Karel.
Hey, how are you?
I'm wonderful, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, I had a 24-hour shift yesterday, so I just came off shift. Pretty busy.
What's your position now in your service? I mean, we don't have to go into the details of the service that you belong to, but what's your level? What's your rank? What do you do in your day-to-day now?
Well, I'm a major. So in Belgium, we use the army ranks. A major is pretty high up. There's one rank above, colonel, but there are multiple roles that majors and colonels can do. In Brussels, I have a job that consists of two parts. Half time, I am responsible for the training department, for the training division, and I try to make the policy with our staff, and we try to implement that policy with regards to training of the 1,100 firefighters in Brussels. And that's half of my time. The other half of my time, I'm responsible for one of the four platoons. We call them companies. So we have about 250 firefighters in the company, and I'm the officer who is responsible. You could say the commanding officer, though we don't use that term.
So you use exactly the same model as the military over there? They're totally interchangeable?
Not 100%, but in a way, some stuff are similar. Yeah.
Is that the same for the police and the ambulance and the medical staff and things like that? They operate in similar structures, or what's the background of it? Why did they choose to take on the military's model?
I don't know. Actually, it has always been that way. I guess the fire department started over 200 years ago, and when it came to organizing it, they looked at the military structure that existed, and they copied it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, a lot of it came from that naval background as well. You know, we look at Massey Shore and the background there. A lot of that came from the Navy, and that's where a lot of our terminology came from and stuff like that.
Okay. Well, in Belgium, I guess it's historically, and nowadays there are maybe more differences, and there are similarities, but the ranks stuck, and I think nobody wants to change that, or most people don't want to change that.
Mm. What made you want to? How old were you when you first joined?
I first joined when I was 23.
23. What did you do before it then? Were you fresh out of school, or?
I joined at 23 when I was as a volunteer firefighter. I joined the Brussels as a career firefighter at the age of 45. And in the years before that, I worked as a civil engineer in an architectural company, doing some structural calculations, and then being responsible for some construction sites. That was my job the 3 years and a half prior to the fire service.
What made you want to join it in the first place? How come you didn't want to continue doing what you were doing?
Oh, that's a good question. In my last job before the fire service, I had a very good boss. I really liked his style. It was a small architecture company, and we were designing apartment buildings at the Belgian coast for the upper class, let's say. So very expensive apartments. And I felt that my added value was limited, because at the end you report to very rich people who ask stuff, and they want it delivered yesterday at no cost, and you get no gratitude. And I said, well, let's look into other things, because I was a volunteer firefighter. I liked that way more than my job. And then Brussels hired at firefighting level. And I said, let's do this. It might be a step down in job, because I was an engineer at the time, and I was working as an engineer, whereas firefighting is regarded as a craft.
Oh,
and
really? Is it not seen as a profession in the same capacity as an architect? Because you're right. I mean, in the UK, we tend to look at these things. It's all the difference between a blue collar and a white collar job for people that remember factories and stuff like that. And it's surprising now, actually, how many people don't aspire, and like certain communities, they wouldn't want their children to be a member of the emergency services because they consider it blue collar working.
Yeah, Actually, that's exactly what happened. My mom cried when I told her that I was going to work as a
Oh
firefighter.
no! Oh, that's not very
He
nice.
did. He did. She had something like, "We paid 4 years of college for you, and now you're going to be a firefighter. Are you
Oh,
crazy?"
mate. How big is the voluntary sector over there? Because you said you were a volunteer firefighter before you joined whole time. Is it a big part of the fire service or is it a small part?
Yeah, it's the biggest part in Belgium. I still am a volunteer firefighter. In the place where I live, I'm a part of the fire brigade as well as a volunteer. I have a sergeant rank over there, and that's the guy who's in charge of the engine,
Wow.
the appliance, as you call it. So I go to calls in two roles. Actually, in three roles, because in my volunteer organization, if we lack staff, the sergeants can drop down to firefighters. So I go to calls as a firefighter,
Oh,
as a
mate.
crew commander, and as a, yeah, I don't know what the English name would be. The American name would be division chief.
Yeah,
So
so like
one level
a
above
group.
the senior officer.
Yeah, the group commander
Uh,
or something.
yeah, so it gives me a nice overview of jobs in the fire service. I really like it. And I have been a volunteer for over 20 years now, and I'm not planning to stop.
So when we say volunteer, and I know we don't want to go over this too much, but is it completely free? Because most people hear volunteer firefighters, and some of them do get paid a little bit. And I'm saying that because as much as we all love it, and a lot of people don't do it for the money, certainly in the UK, because it doesn't get paid very much, I don't know how many would continue to do it if it was completely free, only because it's such a huge demand on people's time.
Well, the word volunteer is rather ill chosen. We are more, the term part timer would be better suited. So in my station, we respond to calls. There's very little volunteers in the station who are paid to be there. So when I'm available for the fire service, I donate my time. I'm not paid to be available, but as soon as they call me, the clock starts ticking and I'm getting paid. So I'm paid for everything I do except for being available. And then they have the requirement that you should be available 38 hours a week on average.
Okay, yeah, so that's kind of yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. So you do still do a minimum availability, but you don't have like we would consider it a retainer fee or something like that, just for you to commit your time. So if you never get any calls, or you don't do any drills, or you don't do any training at your station, you're as effectively just for free. And do you carry an alerter, or do they respond by phone, or?
We have a pager, and the phone also responds to calls.
Mm.
So we're being alerted, and then we respond to the station. It's actually quite a nice system.
Now, you've done this for so long, but what also, I mean, you're going through the roles that you play within the fire service there, and maybe you do or don't consider this to be part of your professional capacity, but for people that are unfamiliar, you probably best known for your work that you have done in both compartment fire behavior training, in ventilation, in helping people learn and develop and progress themselves in their capacity as a professional firefighter. So, I mean, we're going to link it in the comments anyway, but when did you first start on that journey? When did you sort of have the appetite to begin to do things further than your normal operational role required? You know, when did you start branching out to really develop yourself beyond the service that you work for?
I think that was in 2006. I was not very impressed with the firefighting curriculum in Belgium. Also, lots of firefighters, proportionally speaking, were dying on the job. We were killing lots of firefighters compared to the countries around us, and that bothered me. And I started searching. I just got promoted to second lieutenant, is what the army calls it. So the first senior officer's rank. And I was searching to get more knowledge, and I got stuck. I came across Paul Grimwood's work, and I started reading some books and articles, and still I got more knowledge, but with every answer, more questions came.
Yeah.
And we realized we need to do something. And then the chief of training, he said, well, I would like to have a live fire training in Brussels, live fire training program. And we teamed up with the Brussels company, with the Dutch company, who provided live fire training. And they they were actually quite good at live fire training, but they were less good at theory because they gave such a demo day.
Yeah.
And at the end, my boss asked me, what do you think? I think, well, the practice is really nice, but I think I'm better at living that theory.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, why don't you do that and train instructors to do so? And so in the course of 2007, I developed stuff. And in 2008, together with a Dutch company, I delivered the first instructors course. In the meantime, I kept on reading, following classes. We took it from there. And due to these instructor courses, I got more questions from all kinds of people. And I really realized there is so much I can't answer. How is this possible? Because at that moment in time, knowledge-wise, book wisdom, I was already at the front of what we knew in the Belgian Fire Service. I was not so experienced, but I had read all the books. Little is available in Dutch or for the fire service. In the English language, there is tons of literature available, but that's not the case in Dutch. And so I'm an engineer by training. So in Ghent at university, they had a postgrad program, fire safety engineering. So I thought maybe I should try to see if there they have something. And I contacted the professor who was responsible for that program. And I explained him my situation and said, well, I see you have a course on fire dynamics. That could help me. Could I do that class? And he said, yeah, you could, but we only organize it every 2 years. So this year, if you want, you can come and do a course on passive fire protection and smoke and heat control. And I said, well, let's try and do that and do the fire dynamics course later on. And already from the first class on, I was stunned. So he was explaining about pressure profiles, and I'm a very, how shall we describe it? I'm spontaneous. So if I think, I say what I think without too much diplomacy. And at a certain point in time, I said in the class, hey, this corresponds to what I see in the training container. And the professor it's a Professor Mercier of Ghent University. He's a really very nice and very knowledgeable guy. And he laughed and he said, well, that's nice that my theory corresponds to your practice. And that was the first class, and had something like, how is this possible? This guy doesn't go to fires, but he understands things that nobody in the Belgian fire service understands.
Today's podcast was in partnership with our good friends Johnny and the team over at William Wood Watches. Now, if you're not familiar by now, William Wood was the name of his grandfather. He was a firefighter in the British Fire Service for over 25 years, stationed in Newcastle on the Blue Watch. Now, his grandson Johnny is a great friend of the podcast and came up with William Wood Watches to honour his grandfather and the legacy of firefighters all around the world. Now, some pretty cool updates from the William Wood Watch team. When it comes to their chivalrous collection, this August they came out with, honestly, one of my favourite looks for it. They came out with the gun metal for the face of the watch. Now, if you go over there and look at their watches, they've of course got the Jubilee, the Triumph, the Valium, the Bronze. But if you look at the chivalrous range, this is effectively the luxury dress range. It's got that sleek case, the luxury finish, and you can wear it on absolutely any occasion. I myself, I've said on the podcast before, I'm a massive fan personally of the Valiant collection. I've got the red watch, always with the red strap. Now, they do come with a selection of straps as well. And honestly, for me, the straps is probably one of the most favourite parts of it. It really is the one that catches everybody's eye. It's what draws you into it. And when you receive your William Wood watch, that whole unboxing experience is actually kind of special. Whether or not you get the fire alarm box or the VIP roll, usually comes, I think, with 3 different straps. However, I do know, I think it is if you get the Triumph collection, which is the Swiss precision watch made in Switzerland, you actually get that really unique fire alarm box as well that comes with it. Now that thing is absolutely stunning. You know the types you see in buildings where it says break glass on the front of it? That honestly has been made into this luxury leather bound box. You open that bad boy up, you see all the straps, you see the bottom compartment where you get the encasing watch. Pretty sure it comes with the cufflinks as well. And again, if you go over to their website, williamwoodwatches.com, you'll see that this company really does support firefighters all over the world. I think to date they are over £75,000 they have contributed to firefighter charities all over the world. So head on over and check it out. Have a look at the chivalrous first. They've got a chocolate range on there, but for me, the gunmetal one, if you're going to have a look at the gunmetal, that looks absolutely fantastic. The Triumph is probably my favourite, and I'm saving up for that one at the minute, but I have got the Valiant collection myself, and I absolutely love it. Johnny and the team are really making some moves with William Wood Watches, doing some great things for our sector. Now back to the show. So what was
that
fire
was
training actually looking like then? Like you say, if so much of this was new to you, and I know to a lot of Belgian firefighters now, thanks to a lot of the work that you've done, it will be more familiar to them. But a lot of this really formed a lot of the compartment fire behavior training that pretty much most firefighters in the UK will have been doing, I would like to think, for maybe the past 15, 20 plus years, even longer, especially even some of, you look in some of our old firefighter books and some of our old manuals, it still describes a lot of that. So if you weren't doing any of that, what was it? You said you were concerned about the level of training that you were receiving in the fire service and the fact that firefighters were dying. What level of training did you have then when you came into the fire service?
Yeah, for example, as a volunteer firefighter, but that's the Belgian standard. The fire training I got is at the back of a fire station. They set a square meter of litter on fire, and then for the 50 of us, they had 3 portable extinguishers, and that's all the fire we saw in training. In Brussels, however, we had more training and more realistic training, but the average firefighter in Belgium at the time saw his first flames at his first fire.
Wow. So were they doing any work with breathing apparatus as part of your
training?
We
did, but without fire. And for example, in the manual, there was a picture of the nozzle, and it said the nozzle. And the picture of the manifold divider, and it said, well, this is the manifold divider. And we had plenty of drills, but outside in the courtyard in front of the station. And the book stopped when you entered the burning building. There was no chapter on what to do in the burning building. So we didn't talk about progression. We didn't talk about hose stream techniques. We didn't talk about gas cooling. We didn't even talk about direct extinguishment.
Wow.
There was literally nothing in the book how to behave yourself in a structure fire. And of course, that led to very poor firefighting and dangerous situations. So at university, I learned a lot about the theoretical framework, and then more or less the same time frame, I went to Germany to a course that was taught by John McDonough, Shan Raffel, and Peter McBride. They opened lots of eyes with regards to firefighting tactics, practical stuff. I got a chance to join the International Fire Instructors Workshop. I went to workshops all around the world in the next decade. The 3 courses at the university became 4 years of studying at university in Ghent, in Edinburgh, and in Lund in Sweden. So I learned a lot. Practically, I went to lots of fires with Brussels. I had a whole academic curriculum.
What level of support did you get from your service for this? I mean, how much of this did you have to pay for yourself? Because I want to ask about that. How committed you had to be. Was it, I mean, even if they paid for all of it, you still had to put the time and, your own personal priorities aside.
No.
Where did the funding come from for all of this?
A part of this was funded by them, but an important part was funded by myself. And then I started teaching and organizing courses. And of course, that gathered money. And I used the money to pay for travel fares. I did some experimental work on ventilation, on search and rescue. There was some costs there as well, which I paid for. I spent countless hours working so I could gather leave. For example, in 2013, I took 8 months off to go and study 5 months in Lund and then 3 more months to study in Ghent.
Wow.
So I spent lots of my leave studying. In 2017, I had a full-time job in Brussels, and I was 80 days in front of the classroom teaching fire behavior and firefighting. So, I think in 2018, I had 2 full-time jobs. So I think I really worked really, really hard, but that gave me the chance to gather experience, to get to know very interesting people who gave me lots of chances. I was actually pretty lucky, and that brought me where I am today.
So did you face any barriers in trying to organize the training yourself? Because you said, I put on courses. What sort of courses did you run? And did you face any barriers in trying to organize them? Because, if we tried to put on fire behavior courses in the UK just as a member of the community, if in my time off I wanted to go and get myself a container, do a risk assessment and run fire behavior training for firefighters, I don't know what I know it's a bit of a biased question because we already have that level of training that happens in the UK, but I just think there'd be some real questions asked, and I don't know if the services would be as supportive of active firefighters going out and teaching themselves. Did you face any sort of barriers with that?
In the beginning years, I didn't, because everybody agreed with the analysis that we had a problem in training, that people were dying in accidents that, in hindsight, they were completely avoidable. They were just due to a lack of knowledge. And as you know, every firefighter that gets killed, it's a disaster. You have the family, you have the kids. It's such a tragedy each time.
Yeah.
So there was lots of people in the firefighting community in Belgium who wanted to move on but didn't know how. And then you have that young guy who's crazy and who wants to actually live like a monk, to be the fire monk and to do stuff. And so we didn't have all that training. And then I guess the first things I did were good, because if I proposed to do another step, everybody followed me along the way. And the group which followed me became bigger, and then I needed other instructors. And maybe the one thing which is my own credit is I managed to form a group of people who managed to move the fire service. I've been very fortunate that I was the right guy at the right position, and everybody supported me. In the first 5 to 10 years, there were no barriers, none whatsoever. Everybody was happy. And in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, they all use the same curriculum now, with the basic attack cell and then the T cell, and we have more advanced courses, which are not uniform across the fire academies, because the one is more advanced than the other. But we made huge steps forward, and I got to be in front of that. But I think the credit goes to all the people, all the instructors. So we trained about 300 instructors throughout the past 15 years. And all these guys helped to pull the project forward. And they are all firefighters. So, yeah, we made a huge step forward. And my contribution was limited to be the spark and to be the guy who inspired stuff. But I got help by lots of people. Yeah.
I wanted to ask, because you've done so much work. I was scrolling through the CFBT website that you've got, and we'll link it in the notes below, as I've already said. But you've done so much work with the International Fire Instructors workshops, and like with so much of the traveling. And one of the real things that I keep hearing people refer to you as is that sort of master of ventilation, and the way you describe it, and the way you break it down, and the way you teach it on your courses. And also, you've written, a number of really valuable articles on the website, which again we're going to direct people to afterwards. But assuming this was, because we have people from different levels of experience listening to the Firefighters Podcast, and I want to sort of break it down so everybody can understand it. But if you could go through, I remember looking at the article around fire suffering from a lack of air. If you could expand around those 3 key sort of phases that you think of, and the factors that affect the ventilation of fires, just to give us a greater understanding. Assuming from like the work you've done, people that have really never been involved in this sort of stuff before.
You referred to an article I wrote in, I guess, 2010. And at the time we were learning about what we call in Belgium the underventilated fire. That's the fire that avoids flashover due to a lack of air. And it's often combined with pretty high local temperatures. And then when we open up just to get in, it happens that the fire gets extra air, and we evolve to something we call ventilation-induced flashover. And that's a phenomenon which kills lots of firefighters all around the world. It was a new phenomenon. New is a bit of an odd name, but in the 70s, we switched from single glazing to double glazing. And throughout the past decades, double glazing, at least in Belgium, has become the standard. Maybe we have less than 5% of buildings which still have single glazing. And then the problem of the underventilated fires and the phenomena which go along with it became a problem. And so in that article, I described physically what happens. In the meantime, Dr. Michael Reich from Germany has worked on the smoke stopper as a solution for that problem. And I wrote an article about that in, I guess, 2014 or 2015. And now we have training to teach guys how to use the smoke stoppers and when, and how that relates to the problems of
when you say
ventilation.
smoke stoppers, sorry, are they a type of like smoke curtain? Is that what we're seeing? A smoke stopper, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I know there's different terminology in different areas, but yeah, smoke curtains have come in heavily in the UK in the past couple of years. Certainly in a lot of high rises and buildings with greater complexity, they're extremely effective.
Yeah, it's a very effective piece of kit. I think it's the most important invention in the fire service in the past decade.
Wow.
It's a really nice. It's also cheap. Often in the fire service, people come up with very fancy but very expensive solutions.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get the funding, but the smoke stopper, it's what, 450, 500 euros a pop? That's not, you need two for an engine. That's actually little money to make such a step forward.
Yeah. For people that are unfamiliar with the technology, and I mean, we'll put a link to a couple of fire curtains below. Why do you, because that's quite a bold statement. You say it's one of the most effective pieces of equipment you've seen come out in recent years. What exactly does it do? Just expand on that for people. And why do you think it's such a crucial piece of equipment? Because a lot of fire engines still aren't carrying them.
It does two things. First, it keeps the air out. And if you link that to the previous topic, the ones of the ventilation-induced flashover, a ventilation-induced flashover occurs because we open the door and let the air in. And then firefighters try to advance, to progress, to find the seat of the fire. That takes some time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but that's enough for the fire to progress to flashover. And then when it does, there may be 20 meters into the compartment and they don't make it out anymore. But that only happens because the fire gets fresh air. One thing the smoke stopper does is to block the airflow towards the fire. And then they get way more time to find that fire and extinguish it. So that's one important task of the smoke stopper. And the second task is stopping the smoke. And that's especially important if you have larger buildings. So an apartment building or a high-rise building is a very good example. If somebody flees and leaves the door of the fire compartment open, and then the fire service arrives with hoses, then often all the doors towards the staircase are open, at least partially. And then the smoke will travel from the burning compartment into the staircase, and you will stop the evacuation of the people. You might kill people in those staircases due to the smoke. So
that's certainly something that came up as part of the Grenfell inquiries in the UK, and I know that's been a big factor because so many people, when that call was made, or whether it was or wasn't made, to get everybody out of the building, because so many of those floors had been open for a significant period of time, irrespective of all of the fire and smoke spread happening externally to the building. It was the fact that what's effectively should stay a safe area of egress was then just a whole stairwell full of smoke for so many people, and trying to come down even 2 or 3 floors, in a smoke-filled environment is not realistic for people. But then when you're talking about multiples and multiples of floors trying to travel through that, that's a big aspect for, I think, the push in the UK. But like you say, there's a lot of effective uses of it that don't have to come at such a cost, such as the incident at Grenfell.
Well, when I read the Grenfell report, I was abroad. I was actually in the Netherlands for an IFIW session, and Ricardo Wever, one of the Dutch savants, one of the guys who knows a lot in the Netherlands, he wrote a column about how the English firefighters, how London Fire Brigade was dealt with by the inquiry. We both thought it was outrageous. And I was thinking about how can we avoid this in Brussels, because we have similar buildings. And I actually wrote an email to our management, could you buy me 40 smoke stoppers, please? And we have a vehicle with extra fans, and just add those 40 smoke stoppers, that's 20,000 euros. Because I'm convinced that with 40 smoke stoppers, Grenfell would have been less of a disaster. I'm not saying no disaster at all, but at least less of a disaster. It's a sad story.
So when we then look at things like positive pressure ventilation, because this is a slightly different level to which we take the control and also the manipulation of airflow internally within buildings. You've done a lot of work with PPV as well, and I know a lot of the ventilation stuff, certainly in terms of mechanical ventilation, was first introduced in the US. And when they first did it, it wasn't massively popular. It was met with a lot of resistance, and even now, firefighters in the UK can be a little bit scared, feel like it's an unnatural way and even dangerous, and some people have mentioned reckless, to be forcing oxygenated air into a building. Could you take us through the sort of different approaches that you have seen most effective in ventilation, and the rate at which these sort of have or haven't been adopted where you are, and sort of what you've learned across the world, and the rationale behind why people have adopted phase 1, phase 2, or why they haven't, I suppose? Hey folks, just wanted to jump in with a quick piece around firefighter health and wellbeing. Now, we get a lot of messages and emails into the podcast around firefighter health and fitness, whether you are trying to join the fire service and pass them tricky fitness tests, if you are currently serving, or if you are coming up to that next chapter of your life, retiring from the emergency services. We get so many different questions around it. So in partnership with Fitness for the Frontline, we have come up with a series of guidance and programs specifically designed to reflect the physical elements of the role of a firefighter. So whether it's carrying an LPP across an overgrown field, lifting a ladder above your head under running it, or wrestling with cutting gear for 30 plus minutes at some kind of complicated RTC, our bodies are required to lift, push, and carry objects in very specific circumstances. That is effectively what Fitness on the Frontline focuses on, as well as the longer term aspects of overall health and wellness for our firefighters. There are focuses around strength, endurance, and overall conditioning, all achievable and relevant to our roles. Now, we are definitely not about to be smashing out world records or getting that beach body ready in 6 weeks rubbish. The systems and programs that we put in place are adjusted for people's current fitness levels, and they're not a prescriptive way or a one-size-fits-all BS. We also take into consideration all the fitness testing for initial application, and also for current firefighters who want to maintain and progress their fitness levels. It is very likely for myself personally that I'm still going to be a firefighter when I'm 60 plus, so longevity in the role is really important to me, and I know it is for so many people out there. The system has a built-in ability to adjust easily depending on the equipment you have available, your fatigue levels, or if you're coming off busy-ass night shifts and you haven't got a lot of time to work out. You can record your results, log your weights, your body measurements. We've got all the facilities to do that. The system is yours to use how you want to train. We've taken all the fluff and the gimmicks and the BS away from most of the rubbish that you see out there. And this is designed by experienced operational firefighters and qualified people, including myself, with members of the team available to contact throughout the time you are within us in the program. If you ever get stuck, if you're starting to struggle, and also to celebrate those wins and achievements with you. It all starts with no obligation, 7 days worth of the programming, absolutely free. So whether you're joining, serving, or looking at the next chapter in your life, have a glance in the link for the podcast. Fitness for the Frontline is designed by firefighters for firefighters. Now back to the show.
Yeah, you're referring to phase 1, phase 2. There's also phase 3. I suppose you're referring to the work of Mark Yates in the early 2000s, who introduced those 3 phases. So I've seen stuff all around the world. In North America and also parts of the UK, you have some people who are strong advocates of phase 3, where you start using fans before you are putting water on the fire. I was part of the technical panel of UL who examined that tactic, and I was quite skeptical. So I still know one of the guys who developed that in the United States, Chris Garcia, a great firefighter, very knowledgeable, but I was skeptic. And during one of these experiments at UL, we set a bedroom on fire. We closed all the windows and doors of the building we used for the fires, and then a window was opened. It was simulated that it was opened by the fire service. The front door was opened and a fan was started. And 2 minutes later, you could extinguish the fire without the BA, without bunker gear. It performed exactly as described. The whole living room had cleared out, and the airflow was streaming into the burning bedroom, and that was amazing. But on the other hand, that was 1 out of 6 experiments that I saw. In the other 5, it didn't go as planned. So I think for very simple configurations, stage 3 can be an option. I would not advocate it. I think the PPA, as the Americans call it, was developed in a time where fire behavior was slower. The fires nowadays, if they have enough air and enough fuel, they are acting as Ferraris, very fast.
Yeah.
That was not the case at the early 90s, late 80s, when these tactics were developed. So I'm not a big fan of PPA phase 3, except for some exceptions which are quite rare. And then I do think you need very competent, very well trained in order to do that without adding damage or adding casualties.
When you'd seen it go wrong, when you like you reference those are the 5 occasions when it wasn't utilized effectively or when it went wrong, what did you see as the outcome, and what were the dangers inherent either for the building or for the firefighters using it?
Well, you get very hot smoke and sometimes fire spread where you don't want it. And for example, EPA has as basic assumption that all the conditions are met. That, for example, you open up, which means you break a window in reality in the fire room. You might be wrong and break a window next to the fire room. It assumes that the window is big enough to avoid overpressure buildup in the room and backflow through the door connecting to the interior. You assume that the door connecting to the interior is completely open. And there is multiple assumptions which all have to be valid. As soon as one of the assumptions is not valid, then risks are increasing rapidly. So that's why in the Belgian context, where we have lots of connected houses, apartments, I'm not a big fan of stage 3. There is too much potential for a deteriorating situation.
Just to expand on that, when people talk about overpressure, for those that aren't entirely sure, so people might used to sometimes think about, the exit or the vent or the exhaust needing to be roughly some people used to say a third of the size of the entry itself to allow there to be a positive pressure buildup within the room. But you're saying there that obviously if it's too small, it doesn't allow the escape of that hot, toxic, carcinogenic air of unburnt products of combustion. So as a byproduct, they can then get forced into other parts of the building and potentially cause the outbreak of another fire somewhere else, or cause that fire and hot gases to spread into an area of the building that they aren't currently damaging or causing threat to.
Well, I'm particularly afraid of hot smoke and toxic smoke entering spaces where there hasn't been smoke yet and where there's still people surviving.
Yeah.
And then the Dutch did such a very interesting, very well study into smoke spread induced by PPV. And so what they showed is that they had one case where they went, I guess, up to 3,000 ppm of carbon monoxide in a room where there wasn't any prior to the ventilation. You can kill somebody with 3,000 ppm if that person sticks long enough in that room, and long enough, we're talking minutes, tens of minutes, but that's enough to kill somebody at that concentration, and that's induced by the fire service. So I think we should be very careful with what we do. So I was referring earlier on that fires became faster due to a change in contents of the fire, in the furniture and so on. But in recent years, we are also changing the way we build due to energy concerns and to the climate, global warming effect. We want to use less energy, become more energy efficient. So we want to lose less heat. And so we're starting to make buildings more airtight. And that means that if you have an increase in temperature or you add smoke, that for the same increase or the same amount of smoke added, the pressure will increase more than it did before. However, that's only valid for the outer walls of the building, because we don't want to lose heat towards the outside. It's not so bad to lose heat to the neighboring room, which means that pressure rise effect, it's only applicable to the exterior walls. So for the smoke, it becomes easier to travel through the wall, and I'm thinking sockets and that kind of stuff, to the neighboring room than it is to travel towards the outside. So first, we will have a higher pressure inside due to the fact that the envelope of the building is more sealed. So in the burning compartment, pressure rises more quickly than before. And because of the difference between the outer wall and the interior wall, the smoke will travel easier towards the adjacent compartment or the adjacent room. So that's the consequence of the way we build buildings. If we use a PPV fan, we will induce a differential pressure, and we might push smoke to places where we won't expect it because that didn't used to be the case. So that's something to take into account, something that has changed in recent years. Obviously, the most safe way to apply ventilation is phase one, where you first extinguish the fire and maybe do search and rescue and secondary search to be sure that nobody's left, and then use a fan. Then you don't have all these problems.
Do you agree, though, there's an argument for the survivability of the casualty? Or is there, to be fair, if it was at some point in time or at any point in time a fully involved fire or a heavily smoke-logged environment, the likelihood and survivability of that individual? But again, it's dependent on, the layer of the smoke layer. There's so many factors that may suggest that there's still savable life in there. I mean, the reason for us going in is we believe there is savable life. So there is an increase in survivability for utilizing the correct phase.
I'm less sure about that than I was 5 to 10 years ago due to this change in construction. Okay. Because it's true, if you remove the smoke from the casualty, its survival chances increase for that person. On the other hand, you might push smoke where there wasn't and create survival problems for people who weren't in jeopardy. So in Brussels, we still use phase two. So we first put water on the fire, and then before it's completely extinguished, we use fans. I'm still okay with doing that, but I'm less sure about what we do than I was 5 years ago due to the new knowledge.
Where do you think the greatest focus is now in terms of the dangers that are facing firefighters? Because you have quite a colossal workload in your day-to-day life anyway, but you're still putting so much time into populating all of the resources that are on the website. Why did you start the website in itself? What made you first want to do that?
To share knowledge. I think all firefighters should have access to as lot of knowledge possible. So I started writing articles in Dutch, and then a friend of mine who said, well, I will translate some of them in English so more people can read your work. And I said, hey, why not? And then a French guy came along who did the same thing. And over the years, I've been lucky. I met people who think what I write is valuable. And the last article that I've put on my website are available in 9 languages. So, and I get also on Facebook reactions from firefighters from China, from Turkey, Spain, Italy. So, yeah, I like to spread knowledge. I like to help. I like to think that people read it and then it helps them to become better firefighters, be more effective and more safe. And if only one firefighter gets not killed or gets not hurt, then it was all worth it.
I certainly agree with you, and I certainly think looking at a lot of the stuff that you've created, I mean, just glancing through when we look at it there's areas around fire behavior, there's a list of books and publications, there's a massive section on the fire ventilation, the incident command system. I love some of the stuff you've put in there around leadership. When did you first start sort of appreciating the importance of leadership and understanding the different dynamics that you perhaps faced when you've worked with good leaders and bad leaders? What are some of the things you've learned from that?
That's a couple of years ago. I think we made a huge step forward in Belgium when it comes to firefighter education, and when it comes to firefighting, I think we were really lagging behind, and now we're not at the complete top, but we're maybe the sub-top in the world, so we're doing really well. But then, of course, the focus gets drawn to other points, and I've seen some really bad examples of leadership. And I was also, especially in the beginning, a really bad leader. I'm not saying I'm a good one now, maybe an average one.
When you say bad leaders, what was it about them that made them a bad leader in your eyes? What were some of the things you saw or the behaviors you witnessed?
Well, one of the things I believe is that the people you are responsible for should be at the center of everything you do. Leadership is about the people, not about yourself. It's about the group. It's about, I have this motto. I want to have happy firefighters who perform effectively, efficiently, and moreover in safety. But it starts with happy people. I want my people to be happy. I want our people to be happy, and that should be the basis of everything we do. We should try to, and I do say try to because it's not always possible, but we should try to measure every decision we make to the standard of will this contribute to happy people? Because sometimes the organization or leaders take decisions that make people really unhappy. And when I look at the decision, I wonder, where is the added value? We could have done this differently and without hurting people and hurting people's feelings and make them insecure and make them wonder if they have a future in the fire service or in this fire service.
Yeah.
So I've seen firefighters being treated very badly by their senior officers. I had crying firefighters in my office, for God's sake. And that's not okay, because if you have an adult crying because he's being mistreated, then that will never be somebody who's really going to fight for the organization or who will walk the extra mile. I think we should try to make them happy by trying to help them. And of course, I know it's a bit unicorn land. I'm trying to strive for something that doesn't exist. But hey, we can try. And we can try to start from a point. What do you want to do? And how can I help? And this is the broad goal. I mean, in the fire service, the broad goal is pretty easy. We have to help people. We have to help the population. We have to save them. It's pretty obvious what we are intended to do. Now let's work together and achieve that goal. And something which is hard is the resources are not unlimited. And sometimes firefighters, they underestimate the importance of budgets. If we have money for 1,100 firefighters, we have money for 1,100 firefighters, period. And it doesn't help to say, well, we need more men. I agree, but we're not getting them. So we have to figure this one out together.
Yeah.
But I see that these discussions are rarely held in the fire service. I once taught a guy from Marseille, and Marseille is a military fire brigade. It's a Navy fire brigade. And so they're commanded by an admiral. And he told me that their admiral, the guy who's responsible for 2,500 firefighters, that he does one shift every week in one of the stations to be close to the guys. And so they have his ear, they can explain their difficulties. So he can see what's bothering them and he can try to change it. So something I try to do, but I don't do it enough due to a lack of time, is to visit the stations we have in Brussels and talk with the guys. Ask what are your problems and how can I help? But unfortunately, 80% of their problems I can't solve because that's the really upper management. But the other 20%, I can help.
How do you stay approachable? You know, when you're going on to stations and, you know, people knowing who you are or perhaps the position that you've reached in your organization now, how are you able to know that you're getting the truth? Are there any particular techniques or any particular ways that you connect with people to try and, you know, stay humble, you know, humanize yourself so that people feel like they can be honest with you? I
don't know. I'm aware there is something called the power gradient. The more the distance, the more people tell you what they think you want to hear.
Yeah. Do you have rank markings? Do you wear rank markings? Do you wear a different coloured shirt? Do you wear a different uniform?
No, we wear the same uniform, but we have rank markings.
Okay.
There's 250 firefighters in the platoon. About 170 are on duty. And one or two have my rank. So, everybody knows who I am. And especially the young guys will not speak to me unless spoken to. Even if I ask them, they will say, yes, sir, no, sir. They will be polite. Older guys, I've been in that platoon for like 16 years. So they see me grow. They see me make errors. I hope they've also seen me grow. I used to have guys, colleagues, who yelled at firefighters, but really like you yell at small children who have done stupid things. A practice which is also not okay, but just and I hope they see the difference. When somebody messes up, my focus is now, okay, what can we learn from this?
Yeah.
I want to learn. I don't want to punish. I want to know what went wrong, not who did something wrong. And I hope that over the years they see that that's my style. But it's very hard for me to evaluate my success because people, my organization is very top down, and I'm a bit different from that.
Okay.
So yeah, it's really hard. I'm struggling in that regard.
Oh, mate, I feel your pain insofar as sometimes you feel yourself like you speak in a different language. Do you know what I mean? And you're trying to say things that seem so counter to what the rest of the organization, not the rest of the organization, but like the majority, shall we say. They feel like they're reading from a different book sometimes. How have you dealt with being so open and so public about some of the work that you do? Because whilst I find it very inspiring, and I'm sure a lot of people will take so much value from the work that you share, and this may be the first time that some people have even come into contact with you, but in putting yourself out there, you also open yourself up for a lot of criticism. Some people may not like what you do. They may not support you. They may think, who the hell are you? Who do you think you are? Sharing that, why don't you just do your normal job? Why do you feel the need to do so much more all the time? And sometimes, the way you shine your light can actually just cast a shadow on other people. How do you deal with negativity? How do you deal with people that perhaps don't support your way of thinking?
I'm also struggling in that domain. So in the beginning of the conversation, you were asked about the obstacles, and they were absent in the beginning. Because there were problems, and I was the guy who tried to solve them, and everybody was happy that somebody was trying, especially because it was in his spare time. But then things started to run, and I had lots of success. Due to lots of people, it was not only my success. I was lucky, I got lots of chances, but nevertheless, I got very successful, and jealousy started to pop up. And suddenly I became somebody, and people were asking, how is it that you can always go abroad? Why are they always asking you to come? And then I started to be very transparent and to be open and explain to people. But I learned that not everybody is interested in an open and honest discussion. There's a small portion of people who doesn't want to put in the extra effort, but wants the same results. Yeah. And I can't help these people.
That makes such a great point there, mate. When people speak about equality and about fairness, they only speak about that after the fact. Sometimes, and sometimes, don't get me wrong, there is some inequality and there is some lack of fairness in terms of the opportunities that people get. But if all of your initial efforts, taking all the time off, to, paying for courses by yourself, if that had have all come to nothing, nobody would have cared. Nobody would have, offered to give you your money back or give you your time back, because obviously that's impossible to give you your time back. But you were willing to put in all of that effort under no assumption that it would, develop you in any particular way. You were trying to do it because you knew, the lack of training or the lack of awareness and the lack of safety that was happening in the sector, and the fact that it was costing people's lives. But but at some point down the line, and it's always hard to put your finger on when it changes, but it does change in different ways to different people. That support can sometimes it can get a little bit rotten. Only with certain people, and I'm like, I'll be on the front line clapping you for as far as you'll go, and I'm sure so many other people will. There's an old saying that you only throw stones up. You know what I mean? You don't throw stones down. So when people are criticizing, and when people, winners don't tend to criticize each other. They're too busy trying to push the stone up the hill, trying to develop themselves, trying to develop everybody else, trying to move things forward. You don't get anywhere from throwing stones. You're not part of the solution if you're just moaning, if you're just complaining, if you're just criticizing somebody else.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So what I try to do now, over the years, I've identified guys who are 5-10 years younger than I am, who are lower on the ladder, but I think who have potential, who have the same passion for the fire service. And I'm trying to be more in the shadow and help them. In the past week, I was helping to deliver a course on a way to advance hoses into fires. And there was a guy from Mechelen, a major city in Belgium, Steve de Blower, who is extremely passionate about the fire service. He's a younger version of myself. And what I tried is to support him. And I try to take less the spotlight and support other people who I think should do great stuff and do great. And it's not about me. I'm not important. The fire service is important.
This
Yeah, the
is,
fire service is not here for me. I'm here for the fire service.
and it was here
So
a long time before you were here. As I always say, it was here long before us. It will be here long
yeah.
afterwards. And it's amazing what you can achieve if you don't mind who gets the credit. And it's great that you're doing that with those younger individuals because, like you say, if only ever is moving forward because Karel's involved in it, then actually it's not really a success because as soon as you stop doing it, it will stop moving forwards. What you really need to do, which is exactly what you're doing, is empower other people, get other champions that are going to carry this cause because they're part of it, not because they want to see your work continue, because they know and they can see the value of what you're trying to create, and they can make themselves a part of it, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'm also at work. I have people working for me, and I try to coach them and make them better, so they can do it without me. And I've had some good successes with that, also some failures, but I'm pretty happy with the result.
So now that you're coaching and mentoring people, it sounds like you are acknowledging and thinking about the fire service as something that will obviously go on after you're no longer a part of it. How long do you think you have left in your role? How much longer do you think you'll be part of the fire service for?
That's a good question. I actually don't know the answer because the management of Brussels they also are facing a big challenge, and they're thinking about new roles for senior officers. But I live 1 hour and 45 minutes away from Brussels.
Wow.
So over the past, maybe almost 10 years, no, not 10, 7, I've had multiple chances to be promoted to colonel, which is a 9 to 5 job, but I don't want to spend 20 hours a week traveling to work. So I refused. And it seems like part of the solution is to push my level, the majors, in 9 to 5 work. And when that happens, I will leave Brussels because, I don't want to travel 20 hours a week.
Yeah, that's a huge commitment. That people think the job will be the same. It won't. That will be a colossal change to your personal circumstances.
Yeah. So they might take that decision because they think that's the way forward, and then I'm collateral damage, and that could cut my career short. And if they don't, if they would say, we think we're happy with what you do and you can keep on doing what you do or maybe do other stuff, but in your current work regime, which is a mix of 24-hour shifts and 9 to 5 days, then I might spend the remainder of my career in Brussels, and that will be at least 60 more years, maybe 20. And I would be okay with that. I think it's a fascinating department with fascinating people, lots of opportunities. But 9 to 5 would not be, I could not combine this with my health and my personal life. I've made a lot of sacrifices. I didn't see my son grow up because all my fire service commitments. I finally found a girlfriend who doesn't leave me because of the fire service. So let's not mess that up by being even more away from home.
Yes.
So for me, that's a deal breaker. So if they change that, I will find another job, preferably in the fire service, but if not, elsewhere. If they keep our roles more or less as they are, or find other solutions which are also possible, then I might stuck in Brussels for the remainder of my career.
Yeah. That's crazy though, you're actually having those considerations, and everybody does. There's a great book I'm reading at the minute. It's called The Second Mountain. I don't know if it's what other languages it's available in, but it speaks about effectively, what is that larger second mountain? What is that second purpose in your life? And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to change your sector or change your passion or change what you do for a living or change your family situation or anything like that. But it's more, after you reach that first position in life, whether that is a sporting passion or whether that is an academic thing, or like in the fire service, it might be that people think, I want to become a competent firefighter that's great at what I do and that's an effective, operator in my community. And then when they reach the top of that first mountain, they see, they have a different perspective, and they might think, what else is there out there for me? And for you, it might have been, I want to make a greater difference in how this training is delivered. I want to shape the future of this. And for some people, that is their second mountain. But then even when they reach that, life we're a long time here. As much as it goes by in a blink, people retiring when they're 65 years old now, you can live 2 or 3 careers in one. How do you stay motivated over such a long career?
Well, I still love going to fires. I mean, it's for non-firefighters, it's hard to understand, but if we are confronted with a big fire with lots of people in dire straits, we are reminded why we do what we do. And in Brussels, I get the occasion to lead people into battle, so to say, and we save people, lots of people, and we save lots of property, and that keeps me motivated. I'm trying to innovate. I have a constant need to change and to improve stuff, and I got lots of opportunities in the past in Brussels to do so. I got recently, 2 years ago, in a small leadership role in my volunteer department, something which I refused to do because I wanted to be the nozzle guy. So maybe I take some steps there. And my new interest is leadership, so I'm also trying to develop some stuff there and try to focus on the leadership development. So
Dude,
that motivates me.
That is the big stuff. For me, that's where the true gems lie, because the functional skills are absolutely life-saving. They're absolutely essential in every single sector. But the one, constant, no matter where you work, no matter what you do, is people. So if you can develop that ability to understand, motivate, engage with, build rapport with, build connections with, and ultimately, empower and inspire people, human beings, to do things, that's incredible. And not through manipulation, not through, flexing of, your political power, or, threatening them with financial distress or something like that, to actually just learn how to make a connection with a wide variety of different people, having those different styles and having those different abilities. That is, and so much of that comes from self-reflection. Have you done much of that, in all of your leadership roles? How much have you reflected on how you come across? Have you ever, changed? Have you ever adapted? Have you ever done any work on sort of self-awareness and how you come across?
I did, actually. I went to multiple years to sessions with psychologists to be coached, because at a certain time I realized I'm really a bad leader and I don't want to be a bad leader. And I'd like to think I've grown, but you should ask our guys. Now, lots of people have told me that I've changed a lot and I'm no longer the person that I used to be. There is more empathy now. Before my primary concern was the goal. We have to put out a fire, or we have to implement a new procedure. And nowadays, my goal is, how are our people? And how can I contribute to make our people happy? Because if we have happy people, they will do the other stuff. And so I am still driven by results, but where I focused on the results before and I didn't care about the people, now I mainly care about the people because they will deliver the results I need.
Mate, you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. You know what I mean? Without the people, nothing else is going to happen. Nothing else going to happen. With success is a team sport. It's not, you can't get there by yourself, especially in the sector that we work in. It's so essential that we recognize that. And I love that you've had that. What makes you happy? You say about, creating happy people. What makes Karel happy?
Oh, that's a good question. Seeing people happy makes me happy. And besides that, I love sports. Performing sports makes me happy. My ideal day would have 2 hours of sports in it, but that doesn't happen besides holidays. But I try to do 5-6 hours of sports per week, but I would like to do more. Reading, studying makes me happy. The feeling that I'm contributing something makes me happy.
I love that. Absolutely love it, mate. I could speak to you for so much longer, and there's so much stuff on the website I'd love to go through. Look, I'd love to speak again in the future at some point if that's appropriate, and if we'll see how you find it. When I put this episode together, I'm confident that you'll love it. I really love that conversation together, and I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and away from your family to be here with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. I will speak to you soon. Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. The Firefighters Podcast is a global podcast seeking to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operators. Through a series of wide-ranging conversations celebrating those within our sector, we seek to encourage and support this incredible group of people. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield, and I speak with individuals from all walks of life who I sincerely believe can add value to or develop those who have chosen this life path. Please support your emergency services wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.